That's the first slide. But first of all, I would like to say a few words to greet all of you. Zeg goedemorgen, bedankt voor jouw ben hier in het middag in het webinar. Thank you very much for being here. I'm delighted with this invitation with my friend Annick, with whom we shared a couple of moments, but we're very close anyway. So I would love to see him in person one of these days. So maybe one of these days we could meet in person. I'm gonna greet you in the indigenous language of this territory first, and then proceed to my presentation. Thank you very much. Tlasakamati nimits tla palo nimits namits motla palo wilia panika keno tito titlatoa Mexico tlatoli niki mo tlasakamati lia into kolwanika welnika tikate ipani tototla. I just said that thank you very much for being here, past, present, future ancestors, for allowing me for being here in their territory and speaking their Nahuatl language. So, well, here we go. Thanks all of you for being here. Here's the sketch of my presentation. First of all, I'm gonna talk a little bit about endangerment and how endangerment or language endangerment has been conceived, how it's been treated in the literature and in our professional practice as linguists and anthropologists. Then I'm going to present 3 cases, Terplo, the project, the Revitalization Project of Olco and Sullivan, and the language maintenance, revitalization and development project that we've been developing in Mexico for over 30 years. And talking a little bit also about each and every premises of each and every project and the contributions of each project. And then I'll open the floor for questions and discussion. Let me talk a little bit first of endangered languages, how endangered languages have been treated in the literature, at least, in our professional practice. There's been a prevalent necrophiliac approach, a very pessimistic, fatalistic approach, I would say, regarding endangered language, so-called endangered language. We would like to celebrate and change this view. I'm trying to explain myself. Predominant view on endangered languages is one that there's, to put it in a few words, there's not much that we can do about language death. And this necrophiliac approach has prevailed in terms of documenting languages, and this ideology that states in a way, or indirectly, at least implicitly, states that there's nothing we can do about language death. A change in narrative and practice is required in this sense. We need a much more biophiliac approach, a more optimistic and proactive approach regarding this issue. So we're going to talk a little bit about collaborative approaches that level power relationships and pursue well-being and celebrate language diversity and its values and its associated values. Working with endangered languages entails the pursuing social justice and looking to heal colonial wounds from this proactive, different perspective that we need to work on much more. So I'm kind of opposing 2 perspectives here. Criticizing, if you wish, a passive documentation versus an active documentation approach. And the passive documentation approach is the prevailing one, as far as I can see, the predominant one, as far as I can see, at least in the countries that I know. And it tends to deny, and this is very important, speakers' agency on the issue of language endangerment. An active documentation approach, which is the one that we try to promote and to commit with looks to accompany and to promote the agendas of speakers themselves and recognize, of course, the agendas of speakers themselves in terms of what they do, how do they face the threat towards their languages and their cultures or their territories, for example. I put here a couple of quotes that I agree with. As Newman says, it's not enough in our professional work to say that a language is endangered and that justifies our work, and we study, for example, obsolescence or language contact, which are very important and interesting topics, but probably it's not enough as ethically speaking as part of our professional practice. Austin, for example, also criticizes this idea of language as a system ideology that conceives data or conceives speakers as data, I would say, and criticizes the idea that several documenters see revitalization as a waste of time, a waste of resources, and we should work more towards a linguistic social work, as Newman calls it, and we should. Let me see if the next. Well, I have a there. There we go. This ideology regarding the documenting language for the future is sort of a comfort zone that we, and this ideology that in a way conceives languages and speakers as a media to obtain the data, as a media for an end, and it does not recognize the speaker's agency in terms of the survival and continuity of the languages and cultures. So some speakers like Kroskiti, by the way, in the US have spoken of this prevailing view of documentation as he thinks, and I think he's right, that there's a sort of covert racism that denies the agendas of communities themselves. So I'm going to talk about this three projects. TERPLO, the first project is Talleres de Elaboración de Materiales Pedagógicos en Lenguas Originarias, which is workshops to produce educational materials in indigenous languages. In English, original does not work so well. In Spanish, we say lenguas originarias, which is a project that collects data with a cause, not purely in the sake of science, in this idea of the received documentation approach, but looking to promote a multiple documentation that looks to incorporate communities' agendas, favoring their visibility and working in a collaborative paradigm, collaborative research, local language and culture via in situ workshops from the bottom up, if you wish, in a micro politics, language policies. What is the role of the researcher here? Well, the researcher is conceived of as one more of the participants in the project, as a facilitator that contributes to self-linguistic and cultural determination and empowerment. They hold an interdisciplinary approach plus an action research approach. Jan, Leo, Leonard, and Carla Avilés are the persons that had this project and had been working in it for around 30 years, working on this action research method, allowing for the construction of different types of data and data transfers, which is a very important notion. Two types, they distinguish two types of data, or work with two types of data. Digital data, which, as they say, can be shared a posteriori and serves analytic purposes, which is more meant for the academic community for analytic purposes, and B, offline data, which they produce posters, cassette photos, and the like images, audio in situ serving communities' needs, in which perspective, no bringing back of the materials, this idea of bringing back that anthropologists have, that they produce, or linguists have, that they produce documentation and then they bring back the corpus, sometimes in a very, very limited way, in a very not so significant way in terms of what the communities actually require. In this project, no bringing back of the data is required, because they construct the materials in situ in the communities themselves and with communities. It's not an approach, but a very flexible and emergent one, something that we also share in our own project. And it's sensitive to local conditions and diverse eco-linguistic contexts. Let me just give you an example of third floor of this project in San Miguel Soyaltepec in Oaxaca, in which they have been able to reactivate so-called passive competence of speakers that look to overcome communicative sometimes auto censorship or censorship such as purism, promoting sociolinguistic resilience. This is that's something that in our project we've also been trying to pursue, that speakers that are conceived as passive speakers, speakers that only understand the language but don't speak the language actively, are able to recover the oral production of the language. And that has to do a lot with linguistic insecurity and ideologies, of course, negative ideologies that have been infringed in these communities. Here's an example of what they do. For example, they produce descriptions of the Nahuatl local fauna, and they explore the grammar as well with the speakers themselves. Animal descriptions eliciting verbal paradigms in the ecological context. The Massaquot is a boa that you can see right here, depicted right here in this illustration, that is an animal that controls plagues such as rats, kimichi here in Nahuatl. And well, they work with this kind of approach. As a conclusion for Turple, for this project, Turple avoids freezing, as they say in their literature, in their articles, in their publications, freezing knowledge or producing standards. The idea of producing a standard is not part of what they facilitate, what they promote. Instead, rather, they recreate open documents with speakers themselves, allowing the flourishing of language variation as a cultural and linguistic pool based on this idea of feature pool of Mubane that you probably also know. A couple of other things about this project. Well, no printed matter. If we compare this project with the other projects that we're going to talk about, no printed matter is produced. The production is more ephemeral, if you wish. It's paper. It's local. It's a local production. It's not published as we know it, as a print, for example, printed matter. They do not work with children as we do. They work with the youth, but not touching this younger generation children as we do in our project, as we'll see in a couple of minutes. Okay, so let's go on with the next project. Now, a revitalization project that is headed by Justina Olko and John Sullivan, who are the leaders of this project. They hold a decolonial approach. Decolonizing linguistics and anthropology is basic in this paradigm. And it's a much more recent attempt of revitalizing the Nahuatl language. It's reaching a decade, more or less 8 years. They hold a total monolingual approach, recover the work that John Sullivan mostly has been doing in the past decade, I believe, in the Instituto IDIES, Instituto de Docencia e Investigación Etnológica de Zacatecas, where they developed, they still have a Nahuatl MA, one of the few Nahuatl MAs or educational programs in Nahuatl, which is a very interesting thing to do, of course. And there's another one in the Universidad Veracruzana in Jalapa, I believe. They developed workshops that analyze old Nahuatl documentation with speakers of several regions. Please, for those of you that do not know this, but probably some of you do know, but Nahuatl has a huge and immense historical documentation spanning the whole colonial period and beyond, which is a very interesting source of resources to reflect on the language and on the culture of the Nahuatl language and the Nahuatl people. What this project facilitates, it's interdialectal encounters, which is a very interesting thing to do because they bring together speakers of different regions, and this favors the possibility of developing a multi-dialectal competence among the speakers who participate in these encounters. They also have a monolingual series. It's called Untitled, or language, where they publish. They do have printed matter, although they're more or less limited to the printed matter, to books, basically books. And as we will see in our project, we try to develop a much more open, multimodal approach to the issue, but that doesn't mean it's not interesting and important, of course, what they do. Something that is in a way problematic, or can be conceived as problematic, is that they use a standard which stems from the academic world, a standard orthography, an orthography that academics, Nahuatl scholars have produced in the Anglo-Saxon tradition. I see this more as an opportunity than as a problem, an opportunity for speakers to learn this standard academic orthography and be able to manage with different ways of writing the endangered language, Nahuatl in this case. So, well, that's it. Here's a photographs of some speakers working at the National Archive, el Archivo General de la Nación, the National Archive of the Mexican nation. And it's just a photograph that Justina kindly shared with me to share with you. Workshops analyzing Old Nahuatl documentation with speakers of several regions. Okay, so this is briefly, we could speak much more about this project, but this is briefly what they do. Okay, so let's talk about our own project, the project that in Spanish is el Proyecto de Revitalización, Mantenimiento, Desarrollo Lingüístico y Cultural, the Language and Cultural Maintenance, Development and Revitalization Project that it's been active for over. Someone has his mic open, please. If you could silence it, it would be nice. Thank you. We hold what we call an active documentation approach, an approach that it's a much more, as I've already mentioned in my introduction, that it's more proactive towards revitalization, documentation with revitalization in mind. We have been developing, with the pandemic, we've not been able to work in the past almost 2 years, but in the past we've been developing an indirect audiovisual revitalization method in situ from a bottom-up approach based on working directly with the communities and with indigenous intellectuals, actors, activists, and with the communities as a whole. We look to recover indigenous epistemologies. By indigenous epistemologies and methodologies, or ethnomethodologies, if you wish, we are talking about the verbal art, their own plastic, how do you say that? Their own graphic productions, such as the amate and the judes. I'll show you a couple of examples in a minute. we try to promote and produce together with the speakers themselves co-authorships understood or conceived as collaborative contributions to recreate series of cultural sensitive materials to be used in the communities themselves, based on an approach that is multimodal production, which is aimed at empowering authors, communities, children, for example, and women, of course. We look to bridge gaps, for example, the academia is establishing a dialogue with the communities themselves and seeing how can we benefit each other in a win-win situation, so to speak. In the last 5 years, we've been working. That doesn't mean that we've not been working with that in the past for the arts, but we have been developing especially music accompanying indigenous rappers or jarocho musicians. Jarocho is a very famous music in Mexico, very successful, joyful music that it's played in Veracruz mostly. And we also been trying to reach larger audiences, mainstream society. It is important. It is very important to reach or impact wider audiences, different audiences, or multiple audiences, if you wish, in as much and as if we impact the mainstream society in terms of the value of linguistic diversity, that would hopefully create much more respect, understanding between mainstream society and indigenous people. I talked a little bit, I think, what an amate is. This is an amate, it's just an example. It's a bark wood paper that you have right here that the indigenous people from the Balsas region, from the Nahuas from the Balsas region produce and sell, have been pretty successful in the so-called market, crafts markets for tourists, craft market. So that's just to give you an idea. This is an amate that it's part of a book on the Ashiote. Probably you know the Axolotl. If not, I'm going to show you a small video that it's in English that you can understand what an Axolotl is in a minute. I talked a little bit about this audio-visual model. Is an indirect revitalization method. I mentioned this already. It's informal, it's community-based, is interactive and emergent. Here you have a photograph of these kids that have participated in one of the workshops in the Yucatec Peninsula with Maya. There are Maya kids, Yucatec Maya kids. And as you can see, we do it in the open. Of course, in Yucatan, the heat is pretty tough. So we did this workshop in an open space in the Cancha Municipal, in the main plaza, so to speak. And we project a video here that it tries to motivate speakers to participate spontaneously. So what indirect method of revitalization means is that amongst other things, that the participation is a prerogative of the speakers themselves. Nobody is forced to participate, but we expect an emergent participation, spontaneous participation, which is a very, very, very important way of engaging with the kids in this case. So as you can see back there, there are some mothers, some Maya mothers. This is after the workshop was held, and they are pretty happy. We worked with trying to upgrade emotions, positive emotions, self-esteem with this speakers and interaction, and allow space for their participation, of course, for the spontaneous participation. Well, let me just move on and show you some illustrations of the kind of materials that we've been producing. I'll talk a little bit about now the Maya riddles that we use in the revitalization projects. Also mentioned that we have a multimodal approach. So we produce multimodal kits, for example, audio coloring books with audio, with all the books with augmented reality nowadays. That has been the most recent type of materials that we've been producing. And also recently we've been facilitating, accompanying the Maya rappers, as I said, and the Jarocho musicians, CDs with booklets where the speakers can listen to the music and read the languages and see, and that it promotes reading and writing in the indigenous tongue. So I'll let you with this Ashiote. We show up in a festivity. Normally we try to show up in the community's feasts, and then we invite the kids, the community as a whole, to participate in a workshop where we're going to show a movie as the one that we're about to look at. And then we start developing dynamics with the speakers, asking if they know the story or what kind of stories do they know, if they know the answers to the riddles, to the tongue twisters that we work with as well. So let us just see this video of the Axolotl, which is the salamander. This is going to be explained in the video itself.
The axolotl is a type of salamander which lives in the lakes of Mexico City. In ancient Aztec mythology, the axolotl is found in the creation legend. In the beginning there was absolute darkness. Nothing existed except for the gods. They got together and asked each other which of them would be sacrificed to light up the world. Tecusistecatl, the proudest and richest of all the gods, accepted the task enthusiastically.
I'll be the one.
We need two. Who else will do it?
We have to find another.
The gods fell completely silent, until they remembered Nanahuatzin, a mangy old god covered in boils.
Why not Nanahuatzin?
Nanahuatzin.
Why not
Yes.
Nanahuatzin?
I'll do it.
For 4 days, the two gods made offerings. Nanahuatzin offered cactus thorns covered in his blood, bundles of green canes, and balls of hay. Tecusistecatl offered thorns made from precious stones, quetzal feathers, and balls of gold, which Aztecs thought was the poo of the gods. They all built an enormous bonfire, and the gods stood around it to witness the spectacle.
Go on in.
Go on in. Go on. Nanahuatzin.
Go on in.
But Tecusistecatl was too frightened to enter the fire, and after he failed 4 times, Nanahuatzin strode on in. Then the gods waited to see where Nanahuatzin and Tecusistecatl would be reincarnated as the sun and moon.
Something's wrong.
Can't be next to each other.
They have to move.
So the gods all decided to sacrifice themselves, which would give movement to the sun and the moon and create the day and the night. Ehecatl, the god of the wind, began the task of sacrificing all of the gods.
Oh, I don't want to die. I don't want to die.
But history relates that there was one god, Axolotl, Quetzalcoatl's holy twin, who refused to die. In the cornfields, Axolotl was transformed into the double-stemmed corn that the farmers call Axolotl. And when he was discovered, he fled once again, and he hid among the cactuses, transforming into the double-bodied cactus known as Mexolotl. But he was discovered again, and he fled once more. to eventually dive into the water and turn into the Axolotl, one of the most magical creatures known to man. This underwater monster has stayed there for thousands of years. But now much worse monsters, humans and their pollution, threaten the axolotls in the lake where they were first created.
Well, I wanted to show you this. Let's see if it works. If not, I'll just give you an idea. It's a book with augmented reality. This has inherited this history of the Axolotl. As you can see, the rabbit here, the rabbit here represents the Tecusistecatl. This rabbit, the small rabbit, is the tail of the rabbit and the tiger. So the rabbit, in a way, has inherited this identity of the Tecusistecatl, which was, as you could understood from the Axolotl video, it's a very arrogant and brave. He pretends to be a very brave animal. He's saying that he's always defending other carnivore animal, and he's always pretending that he's not afraid of the tiger, right? So one day there was the squirrel's birthday, so the animals organized a party for the squirrel, and the tiger wanted to come to the party, and he was full. He didn't want to eat anybody, but he was not invited, of course, to the party, and when he shows up, they get really scared. Of course, in this case, well, you cannot listen to it because we have this audio problem, but the advantage of this material is that you can listen to the Nahuatl language, it has an English and a Spanish version. So in the party, the rabbit was pretending to be very, very brave, saying that if the tigers show up, he would defend them. I would protect you, he said, when the animals were concerned about the possibility of the tiger showing up. So the tiger finally shows up, and they all run away, of course. And the rabbit pretends to be very brave and stands, and leaving behind his poo, he jumps till he reaches the moon. And that's why we see a rabbit in the face of the moon up till this day. So as you can see, there's a very interesting continuity between the ancient tale or the ancient legend of the Axolotl and the contemporary one. So I'm not going to show this riddle. It's really a shame that I cannot do this. But well, I'll just remind you what we do with this material. We basically show this materials at the community level. And then we try to develop dynamics with the speakers. And speakers, kids basically, who come with their parents or with their grandparents, and that favors, in a way, intergenerational transmission, spontaneously, if you wish. If they reply and they participate, which they actually do pretty much, and at times they're incorporated in the project themselves, for instance, producing the voices for other videos or other materials. So we identify possible participants in the project to produce new materials at the local level. The kids that reply or that offer new resources or that participate actively, start receiving materials. We bring back materials, so we give them books, provide them with books or with audio of the videos themselves. So the idea is that this goes back to the families themselves for the local use, the local consumption. So you cannot listen to this, I believe. So I'll just do the show on my own voice. So this is a tongue twister. So as you can see, this allows us to understand the structure of the Nahuatl language, which is a polysyllabic language. Tin is buttock. Tin with a long vowel is little or tiny or kid or diminutive. Kirian is a type of a tree. Ten is lips. Pitch is to blow or even to kiss. Kontli is a pot or a jar. Sin again is small or little. So you're going to treat it with care and give it a kiss if you dare. So if some of you know the answer, we will find a way of getting to you, or you can come to Mexico to pick up your prize, your book or your video or whatever we can share with you, or a CD with music in one of the languages that we've been working with. Somebody knows the answer? What is the thing that you have to treat with care and you give it a kiss if you dare? Are you there? Okay, this is silence. Are you there or not? Hello?
Hello?
We are thinking it's difficult.
You're thinking. Okay, what is it? Is it difficult? You think it's difficult? Okay, maybe you can reply the tongue twister. Well, if you can't, nobody's forced to participate. So it's the atecomat is this recipient to bring the water to the field, which the Nahuas used to bring to the field. Of course, this is a very nice decorated one. It could also be a bottle.
Rosalba, I think she has a suggestion there. She's asking whether it's a snake. She says that she's awful at readings. Rosalba, you can directly talk to, you don't need to. So she said perhaps a frog.
A what?
Snake or frog? Snake or frog?
A snake or frog. You're going to treat it with care and give it a kiss if you're there. Okay. You play for kissing frogs. That's interesting. One thing that we could recover from this conversation is that we never say that someone has the right answer or a bad answer necessarily. We just try to play around with these possibilities as resources, not as saying this is correct or incorrect, which is, as we know, very important thing to empower speakers and upgrade their self-esteem. Is not saying you're not speaking correctly or you're not having the right answer. We are very open to different answers. So a frog, that I don't know how a frog can be something that you treat it with care. Why not? And you give it a kiss. Maybe you want a prince or something like that. I don't know. But let me give you another example. So tsin, as I said, it's buttocks. Tsin with a long vowel is little. Kirian is this type of tree, which is actually sidian. Tsin is a buttock again. Tson is the root for hair. Kwa is the root for to eat. And kwakwa reduplicated is to bite. So it's not a he or a her, but a thing that will bite your hair. What is it? It's a riddle, but it's a tongue twister. What's interesting here also is in this verbal art of the Nahuas, tongue twisters, at times at least, are also tongue twisters. So it's a very joyful, interesting, powerful way of engaging with kids, with speakers, and bringing back these materials and using the language, basically. Anybody has an idea? I assure you I can send you a book or something to wherever you are. Or when I go to Holland or whatever, I can bring you a book or a CD or whatever I can share with you. It's a bilingual tongue twister riddle. Okay, so now I move on to the monolingual material. We also produce monolingual material, which has probably as you do know, actually do know, monolingual materials is a way of moving on in a stage of using the total immersion approach to the language. So sitlakat kikotikanakat kananakat makasakat kikotika itlakat kikotikanakat kananakat sitlakat wakuniitlakat kwakat kikotikanakat kananakat kananakat kikotikanakat sitlakat. So this is also a game. This is a book that comes from a book. The kids can color the book, of course. It's a coloring book, and it has audio and it has a game. So the game is that you as fast as you can. So who can do it faster? And wins points. So this is kind of a contest that also the kids can play with their family or with their friends at the community level. That's the idea. And it's interesting that, well, I don't know if I'm taking too much time, but yeah, I'll just move on. Well, let's talk a little bit about riddles. Riddles are very important quizzes of verbal abilities deployed in verbal contests. They are it's a very ancient genre present since pre-Hispanic times. Since Sahagún, the friar, the first ethnographer of the Americas, probably to produce a huge encyclopedia of Nahuatl. And this is very interesting from the point of view of the speakers, Nahuatl speakers, at least in the Basas region. A tentet, which in the 16th century meant a 16th century jewel, that's something that you pierced in your lips, a turquoise stone, which meant, of course, good speech, a good speaker, a flourishing a top speaker. Today it means a top speaker, the ultimate speaker. So a tentet is someone that can match with riddles, with tongue twisters, with tales, that has all this knowledge. Of course, it's a gate to local language and culture. It's not a minor genre, as could be thought from a Eurocentric written matrix, but an index of a very powerful socialization of language and cultural, which gives language a continuity and vitality. So, well, I had an ancient one here, but since we cannot listen to the audio, I'm not going to dare reading this because it's in classical Maya. I could, but maybe it's just better if we just stick to the translation. So Chilambalam, Los Chilames is a series of books, around 16th century books. Chilam Balam means he who has mouth, literally. It's also something like the tentet here, which is a speech priest, someone that it's a chman, a shaman, which invited a speaker, someone that belonged to the elite, as a ritual. The riddles are rituals, as initiation rituals in Yucatec Maya. So one of them, just as an example, is my son, bring the night firefly for me, that which from the north till dawn spreads its smell, licked by the tongue of a Balaam, of a jaguar. So here you go with this is the Khmer, this is the to-be member of the elite or the potential prince. So he had to bring a cigar, come back with smoking his cigar. So the cigar represents the light, it represents the fire fly, and of course the Balaam is himself. Remember that the jaguar is a symbol of the highest person in this society, a priest or a member of the elite. Nowadays, we still have this genre in a much more popular way. So I'll read this for you. Nakle bala palen upache la salt utue la chak. Inside red, outside hairy. Without me, food tastes ordinary. So this is the Ashiote, which is Oreyama Bishana, I think is a scientific name, which is depicted here by. This illustration was made by a Maya by a Maya activist and painter, which is Marcelo Jimenez Santos. And we have a coloring book that also has the Ashiote. We have translated the Maya, original Maya, into 5 other languages. So we also use this to create a pan identity with other Maya authors from other communities. Here's the video. I'm going to skip that. Here's a tongue twister also that had audio, but tongue twister in Maya. And it's a shame that I cannot show you that we don't have audio, but we suggested the rappers in the Yucatan to rap the tongue twisters and the Maya advices, the old now Maya Yucatec or Yucatec Maya tongue twisters, and they did. So that was something that I wanted to show you also, but if I don't have audio, it's difficult, of course, to do that. So I'll just maybe leave it like that, see if we can repair this problem and listen to some of the music. For example, this Tatsotona CD or other materials. But I'll just stop there because this is not really working with the audio. Sorry about that. I apologize for the inconveniences.